Woohoo! Congratulations, Carl. God bless. And congratulations to those of you who are watching our Unity of Monroe YouTube channel for tuning in. We just were celebrating a few birthdays here and the observance of a 66 years ago of someone having their first child. So that's fantastic and wonderful. Whatever you're celebrating, I'm glad you could tune in whenever you are tuning in to celebrate with us here at Unity Monroe. Thank you for doing that. You know, I think we've all heard the slogan, have we not? Truth in advertising. We've heard that slogan before. Truth in advertising. What does that mean? Well, it means that they have to be telling the truth about maybe what the ingredients are. Telling the truth about, how accountable they are to the public of what they're giving us. And would that everything that is advertised is true to that narrative, that it's true to that kind of thought, that there's truth in advertising. I say that because there's some companies that over the years have tried to, shall we say, sloganize, if that's a word, sloganize their product to send it out to another country, to put it in another language. And sometimes it doesn't work. When Coca-Cola first shipped to China, they named the product something that when pronounced sounded like Coca-Cola. But the only problem was that the characters that they used simply said this. It meant, bite the wax tadpole. Oh my God. Now, I don't know what that means, and they didn't know what that meant. So Coca-Cola said, well, we're going to change it. So they changed the characters. If you know Chinese language and Chinese writing, they changed the characters, and now it means happiness in the mouth. Well, a little bit better, a little bit closer to what they wanted. Back in the days when GM had the car known as the Chevy Nova, when they decided to sell that Chevy Nova in Spanish-speaking countries, they didn't realize that, I guess they didn't have anybody who spoke Spanish, that Nova simply meant no-go. Oh. And if you know anything about the Chevy Nova, that's probably truth in advertising. Absolutely. Now, I do want to apologize ahead of time for this one, because back in the days when Coors Beer coined the slogan, turn it loose. Oh my goodness. They didn't realize that it was going to be translated in another language as suffer from diarrhea. Now, we got to change the subject line because there's too much of that stuff that's been going on in the country and all of that stuff. But you think about truth in advertising, you think about what truth is for you. Truth within your soul. Truth that is filtered through our consciousness. And truth, all truth, no matter we're talking about big truths or little truths or truths out here or truth within, all of it is filtered through our consciousness. It's filtered through your consciousness, my consciousness, the whole world's consciousness. You ask 10 people something that happened, and you'll get 10 different answers about what happened in the world, what happened in life itself. So when we look at what our truth is and how we fashion that truth, we have to realize that it's always colored by our consciousness, by where is my heart in this moment? What am I declaring for myself at this particular time? I find it's kind of helpful to look at it from that perspective when we're dealing with issues in the world, because the recognition is that like someone like Carol or someone like Lynn may have their own opinions and truths about certain things. And when I can recognize that what's right for them is right for them and what's right for me is right for me, it sets a whole new tone and agenda for how we can look at life, how we can look at the world. Because what's right for, say, Carol or for Lynn or someone else, it may not be right for me. But who am I to say, well, this is the truth and only the truth. So help me God. The core truth is that each one of us has this wisdom of truth within us. What is the truth within us? The little truth is the world that is ephemeral. It's out here. It's changing. But there's a greater truth and wisdom within us that we have to own up to. Live and say, this I know is the truth of my being. What is the truth of my being? I'm a child of God. I'm a child of life itself. I am filled with the power and these faculties of love and faith and trust and understanding and peace. And this is how we have been fashioned. All of us have been fashioned. And we filter this big T truth through this consciousness to push out into the world and to live from principle first and foremost. That's the most important thing, I think, is to recognize that we can all better understand this one core truth. We are as God created us to be. This one whole truth that simply says that, yes, I own up to this capacity, what it means to be a child of the universe. All forms of life, when you think about it, have this truth and this wisdom within, but we discern it in a different way, we human beings. All animals have a wisdom and a truth, do they not? And they direct their course of life in a certain way, their capacity to use their what? Their intelligence, their own ability to do things in certain ways. Whether they're the birds of the sky or the fish of the sea or animals that walk on land, they have this certain direction and course. And we too have an intelligence, but we have this wisdom, this core as human beings to move through life with ease and grace and dignity. But what do? Sometimes we get caught up and wrapped up in this human condition, this human problem that we say, this is the problem. This is the challenge. Well, it certainly can be that. But it can also be that opportunity, that representation of what life can be, an enhancement. To recognize that, yes, we have a divine intelligence. We have a divine wisdom. This is why I think it's so important and so vital to support people who give of themselves with, dignity and grace by teaching. The institutions of higher learning are so grand and noble because they teach intelligence and wisdom and grace and all of these things that go into making life a richer and more vast experience. So this idea of recognizing that we're like the animals in that respect, but we're better in respect of we're just not dealing from that issue of human conditioning. We're not just functioning on an autopilot kind of way like some animals do. So we recognize that there's a big truth. It is the Spirit in us. It is all of our faculties. And then there's the truth of the world that sometimes we have to deal with. But sometimes gets usurped or brought into and believed as the big truth. Unity co-founder Charles Fillmore talked about truth when he said, truth abides in the fullness at the very core of our being. Now, as our consciousness expands, or as we begin to understand or have an awareness of that expansion of consciousness, so we allow wisdom, we allow intelligence to grace our heart and our soul. When we have that awareness, we touch the everlasting truth. And what seems new is but the unveiling of that which always has been. So what seems new to us maybe is a truth that we are beings of peace. That may seem new to some people, and yet it isn't. It is the very depth and core of our being. And we can always tap into that as our consciousness expands. What is this expansion of consciousness? To be filled with an understanding, a wisdom, to be filled with the recognition that there's not just truth in the world with a little t. There's the big T of truth that is all of the divine intelligence, wisdom, dignity, and grace that flows in and through us as we expand our consciousness, as we expand the truth within us. I think sometimes we forget that the little t truth out here is always going to be conditional. It's always going to be changing. It's always going to be in flux. And all of that takes place. And yet we sometimes forget and say, well, that little t is the most important truth in our life. We equate that little t with our big T truth, and the recognition is it is not. It is never that. Sometimes we hear people, or maybe we've felt that in our time of experience in this life, that our faith, our tradition, our religion, our spiritual direction, our politics, our society, and all of that, which is all kind of out here, stood for a bigger truth for all. As I said earlier, my truth is going to be different from your truth. You have to experience your own truth. My truth may be there to assist you, to be a catalyst, and yours for me as well. Nothing wrong with that. That's perfectly important. But the recognition is we have to find that big truth within, where we can say, this I know. I am a creative being. This I know. I am blessed and loved. Loved by the people around me. Loved by Spirit, by God. Loved by the fact that I am as I was created to be. I am who I am. There's the truth of our being, our soul, the very core and the essence of who and what we are. And then there's the truth of the world. And we should not get those two confused, but sometimes we do. We think, oh, that's got to be true. It's true as in a little t truth. At one time, people believed in those little t's and equated them for the big truth. We believed that, the earth was the center of the universe. We believed that there were fixed points to the earth. And all that went into this idea of promoting the big truth. We believe that we were created not as these original ideas and blessings in God, but so many people, and still today, some people believe that we were created as worms of the dust. And yet we know that we are created in the likeness, the beingness of God itself. So that pervading truth is the recognition that when we read things, or when we hear things, or when we contemplate what is truth for us, we might go to a sacred text like Scripture, like the Bible. And even in the Bible, we have to say, is this the absolute truth? With a big T. Because so many people over the years have said, this is the absolute truth. It may be for them, but it may not be for others. Speaking of the Bible, one of my favorite passages comes from the book of John, John 18:37, where it says this very cryptic conversation between Jesus and Pontius Pilate. Where Pontius Pilate says, so you are a king? Kind of snarky way he said that, I'm sure. Like we were there. Jesus answers him and says what? He says, you say that I am a king. For this purpose I was born, and this purpose I have come into the world. To bear witness to the truth. I think that sums up a message, the message of this truth that Jesus bore, that Jesus brought to us. This message, the core of his being, to bear witness to the truth. What is the truth? Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice. Now I said that word, what is truth, because later on in the conversation, the next verse, shall we say, what does Pilate say to Jesus? Well, what is truth? What is truth? And if we know the passage, if we know that verse, something very interesting happens right there. Because Jesus does not answer. Why? Why did the Bible writer, whomever they were, decide in that moment not to have words put into the mouth of Jesus? And first of all, we go back to saying, who was there during that conversation between two people in a private setting, writing it down? This is the creation of these spectacular Bible writers who wrote from this inspired consciousness that they had, this soul that they had. So they're creating this conversation that symbolically and metaphysically makes sense. But to look at it and say, oh yeah, this was a true, absolute conversation between two people verbatim. But what I love was that the writer was creative enough and is astute enough to say, I'm not going to answer that question. Jesus is not going to have those words. Why? Maybe perhaps because Jesus knew, or the writer knew, that truth must be what? Discerned from within. Jesus could have said, well, this is truth, blah, 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 blah. And maybe in some ways he did, in other teachings, in other ways. But in this particular passage, it's saying, find and trust the truth of your soul. The very core of your being, that you are an enlightened being. You're given these gifts of great wisdom. And so when you're facing whatever it may be, where did that come from? Whatever you're facing, it may be, you have a core wisdom and truth that says, I'm more than this. I talked a little bit about this last week when I talked about wholeness, health, all of that. We are more than that. We are more than whatever the issue may be. To find the truth within that's always good, that gives us grace and dignity, that lifts us up. To find that truth and wisdom where we can say, this I know the truth of my being. This I know the truth of the universe and of the world. This I know the truth of that person I'm having a disagreement with because they believe whatever they believe may be true for them, but it's not necessarily true for us. This I know the truth of my being. This I know the truth of my soul that lifts me up. Affirm those words, this I know, this day. That truth and that wisdom that comes to you and through you and connects you in mind and heart. Now there's a truth and a wisdom that we know, and I've been talking about intelligence and understanding and all that, and we know that intellectually we can understand things. We read things, we discern things, and we take that on, we process that through intelligence. Nothing wrong with that. That's perfectly a legitimate step and a necessary step on our spiritual evolution, and that's part of it. But we know that spiritual understanding and wisdom brings us into a fuller recognition of intelligence. Because on the one hand, I can read all the books and discern it and understand it intellectually, but I have to really do what? Apply it. I have to put it into use. I have to let it evolve. You see, that's the big truth. There's a truth where it says to us, oh, these are all the great ideas and the wisdom of the universe. I know that intellectually. But do I apply it into my life? I share that with you because I had a friend for 3 years, God bless his soul. 3 years he tried to enter into the Unity ministry way back in the days. And I say this because he was one of the most intelligent souls I ever knew. Absolutely. Very smart, an engineer for IBM most of his life. And he knew truth, front and back, because he had that kind of mind. A mind that I think many of us would wish to have, and yet there was something there where the application, nothing against him. He was a wonderful soul in many respects. But the putting it from book learning into actual living truth, T, the big T, was difficult for him and challenging. And so we have to find that truth where I can say, this I know from these things I've learned, but now I'm learning how to grow into it, how to let that truth be shown in the way that it can be, to enlighten, to lift people up, to grow in wisdom. That truth that invites us to find, as Jesus talked about, that divine within ourselves. To define the divine within ourselves, that true expression of our Christ nature. And when you think about it, when we begin to intellectually understand something and then to process and bring it into life, it takes the journey. It takes that time, that frame of reference, and that time of putting it into action. If you don't know anything about the Chinese bamboo plant, you know that you plant that particular seed, but it takes a long time for it to show any visible or viable signs of growth. For 5+ years, it won't grow. And then over a time period of simply 90 or so days, a little bit longer perhaps, it grows to an incredible height. Now, was that growing in those 5+ years because we didn't see it, or was there something else? There's something there that when we plant those seeds, like the seeds that we plant in our consciousness of prosperity, of understanding, of healing and harmony, when we plant those seeds, we don't know how tall that plant, those seeds that we are planting, is going to grow. Just like the bamboo shoots that grow up in that 90-day period. So we plant those seeds, and those seeds come when we say, this I know is the truth of my being. This I know is the truth of my soul. To claim that. This I know when I see these effects in the world. I know a greater truth, a greater wisdom, and I apply that into my life. So even if we're growing through challenging times, and when are we not? Not that we want to bring that on into our lives, but for some of us, in our human condition, we just have opportunities that are always there. And guess what? That's all of us. We're all like that. When we're facing something, we have to grow through it. We have to grow and plant those seeds, and where we declare, this I know this day. This I know is the truth of my soul and the wisdom within, in that stage of enlightenment, in that state of enlightenment. So let us declare, this I know. What? I am a child of God. Always. Nothing can separate me from that. And nothing separates you from that inner wisdom. This I know. I am whole, healthy, and well. This I know in my heart and soul. This I know, I am prospered in all that I think, say, and do, because I am in oneness with divine wisdom. So let us remember, this I know, the truth, the big T, prospers, blesses, and honors each step in my life. Now let's take a moment to take this opportunity to sit back and let the wisdom, the intelligence, the understanding of Spirit just bless us and honor this stage in our evolution, our stages of life itself. And I invite you to close your eyes, to sit back and relax and find that place and space of comfort. And just take this moment to take a time out, a break, if you will, from whatever the activity may have been this day, this moment. To just pause and direct your energy into the power of your breath as you breathe in and as you breathe out and let go. Begin to see through that demonstration a letting go of tension or concern, a letting go of doubt, breathing in once again and breathing out. I let go. I let go, for I am centered in that fullness, that awareness of the divine presence, which I call the Christ presence. And it is the truth of my very being, the truth that lifts up my human condition, the truth that raises my expectations. It is the truth that brings a vision for infinite possibilities. I allow myself to demonstrate this each and every day in times of prayer and contemplation and meditation. And I simply walk in that affirmation, that awareness of this I know, that I am as God created me to be. I am greater than the little t truth of life and the effects. For I know that that is changing and that is moving through moments of challenge and chaos, moments of opportunity and growth. But this I know, the claim within my soul that says, I am free, I am alive. And so I look out upon this horizon of life, wherever I am right now. I observe, I see, I declare in this moment, this I know, the greater good of God. What is that greater good for me this day? This I know as I sit in moments of quiet and introspection. This I know, that all things are possible through this divine connection, never separate but always in oneness and purpose with God, in God, and through God. I declare in this moment, this I know. I know love. This I know. I know joy. This I know. I know peace. And there is no thing outside of myself that can disturb that calm peace of my soul. This I know. This I know in the silence. I boldly make that declaration, that affirmation of my whole being. This I know. And I stand in that moment of wisdom and understanding and truth. This I know, this day and beyond. And so I stand in that great grace and wisdom of the very core of my being as it is revealed in the consciousness and the spirit of who I am. Thank you, loving presence, for that awareness and for that gift to all of creation. This I know this day, that truly that spiritual understanding and wisdom continues to evolve and grow and prosper in every phase. So be it.